Picture this. You're at your company's annual retreat, surrounded by coworkers you've shared 5 years of victories and challenges with. The air is filled with laughter, the smell of barbecue, and presentations about the exciting year ahead. Then your phone rings with the worst news of your life. You rush to your boss, tears in your eyes, asking to leave immediately. He looks you straight in the face and says the words that will haunt you forever. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. What would you do? Well, let me tell you what I did and how that single moment changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Martinez, and at 32 years old, I thought I had life figured out. For 5 years, I had poured my heart and soul into TechForward Solutions, a mid-sized software consulting firm nestled in the heart of Austin, Texas. The company specialized in helping businesses transition to cloud-based systems, and I had worked my way up from a junior implementation specialist to senior implementation manager. It wasn't just a job for me. It was my identity, my passion, and honestly, my second home. Austin's tech scene was booming, and TechForward was riding that wave beautifully. Our office sat in a sleek building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lady Bird Lake. Every morning I'd arrive early, grab my coffee from the little café on the first floor, and head up to the 7th floor where our team worked magic for clients across the country. The energy was infectious. We weren't just implementing software, we were transforming how businesses operated, making their lives easier, their processes smoother. I had built something I was truly proud of at TechForward. My team consisted of some of the most talented people I'd ever worked with. Marcus Williams handled all our marketing integration projects with a creativity that never ceased to amaze me. Emma Johnson coordinated our most complex implementations with a precision that made even our most demanding clients feel at ease. Tyler Brooks could analyze data patterns that others missed entirely, often predicting potential issues weeks before they surfaced. Together, we had successfully implemented cloud solutions for over 200 companies, ranging from small local businesses to Fortune 500 corporations. The work was demanding, but incredibly rewarding. I remember the night we stayed until 3 a.m. to ensure that Austin Medical Group's patient record system migrated without losing a single file. Emma had ordered pizza for everyone, and we sat around the conference table, exhausted but determined. When the migration completed successfully, the relief and joy in that room was indescribable. Those were the moments that made everything worth it. My direct supervisor was Robert Chen, the regional operations manager. Rob had been with the company for 8 years and had a reputation for being results-driven and ambitious. He was the kind of manager who expected excellence and didn't accept excuses. In many ways, I respected that about him. He pushed our team to deliver outstanding results, and under his leadership, our region had become the top-performing division in the company for 3 consecutive years. However, Rob had a way of making everything feel like a competition, even among team members. He would pit different project groups against each other, comparing metrics and making comments about who was pulling their weight and who needed to step up their game. While this created a high-performance environment, it also fostered an undercurrent of tension that I tried my best to navigate diplomatically. Despite the pressure, I thrived in this environment. I had a natural ability to connect with clients during their most stressful transitions. When businesses are moving their entire operation to the cloud, they're essentially putting their trust in strangers to handle their most valuable digital assets. I understood that fear, and I made it my mission to guide them through every step, with patience and expertise. One of my proudest accomplishments was landing and successfully implementing the Cloud Sync integration for Lone Star Retail, a major chain with over 300 locations across Texas. The project was worth $2.7 million and had been the largest single contract in our company's history. The implementation took 6 months and required coordinating with dozens of stakeholders, managing multiple software integrations, and ensuring zero downtime during the transition. I'll never forget the day we flipped the switch on Lone Star's new system. I was in their corporate headquarters in Houston, surrounded by their entire IT team and several executives. As we watched their new dashboard light up with real-time data from all their locations, the CFO turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "Jessica, you've just transformed our entire business." That moment reminded me why I loved what I did. The success of the Lone Star project had elevated my status within TechForward significantly. Suddenly, I was being invited to strategy meetings with senior leadership, consulted on major decisions, and given increasing responsibility for our biggest clients. Rob seemed proud of my success, often mentioning the Lone Star project in company meetings and using it as an example of what our team could accomplish. My personal life, while not as structured as my professional one, was fulfilling in its own way. I lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in Cedar Park, just outside Austin, with my rescue dog Luna, a golden retriever mix who had boundless energy and an uncanny ability to sense when I needed comfort after particularly stressful days. My mother, Carmen, lived about 3 hours away in San Antonio, where she worked as a school librarian. We talked every Sunday morning without fail, and she would update me on her garden, her book club, and always ask when I was going to find a nice young man to settle down with. I had been dating occasionally, but nothing serious. My focus was entirely on building my career and proving that I belonged in the competitive world of tech consulting. I had goals, big ones. I wanted to become a regional director before I turned 35 and eventually start my own consulting firm. Every decision I made was calculated to move me closer to those objectives. The company culture at TechForward was intense, but rewarding. We worked hard and celebrated harder. Every quarter, if we hit our targets, the company would throw elaborate parties at trendy Austin venues. I remember one celebration at a rooftop bar downtown where the CEO, David Thompson, personally thanked each department for their contributions. David was charismatic and approachable, the kind of leader who remembered everyone's names and made you feel like your work mattered to the bigger picture. David had built TechForward from the ground up over 15 years. He started as a solo consultant working out of a coffee shop and grew it into a company with over 400 employees across 5 states. He had this philosophy that he shared often: we succeed together, or we don't succeed at all. It was more than just a corporate slogan. It felt genuine when David said it. He would walk through the office regularly, stopping to chat with employees at all levels, asking about their projects, their challenges, and their ideas for improvement. The relationship between Rob and David was interesting to observe. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rob clearly respected David and worked hard to impress him, but there was always a sense that Rob was positioning himself for bigger things within the company. Rob would often mention his strategic vision for the department and his ideas for optimizing operational efficiency. Sometimes it felt like Rob was more focused on climbing the corporate ladder than on the actual work we were doing. As we approached our annual company retreat, the energy in the office was electric. The retreat was always held at Lake Travis Resort, about an hour outside Austin, nestled in the beautiful Texas Hill Country. It was a tradition that everyone looked forward to: 3 days of team building, strategic planning, and celebration of the year's accomplishments. The setting was gorgeous, with the resort sitting right on the water, surrounded by rolling hills and oak trees. This year's retreat was particularly significant because TechForward had just announced a major expansion into the Dallas market, and there were rumors of possible promotions and restructuring. I had been working on a comprehensive proposal for improving our client onboarding process, which I was scheduled to present during the retreat. The proposal represented months of research and data analysis, and I believed it could revolutionize how we approached new client relationships. The week leading up to the retreat was hectic. Everyone was putting finishing touches on their presentations, and the office buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Rob had been particularly demanding, wanting to review every presentation multiple times and making numerous suggestions for improvements. He seemed more focused than usual on making sure our department made a strong impression during the retreat. Marcus, Emma, Tyler, and I had been working late nights to prepare not just our individual presentations, but also a collaborative proposal for expanding our team to handle the increased workload from the Dallas expansion. We believed that with the right additional resources, we could increase our implementation capacity by 40% while maintaining our quality standards. The proposal was solid, backed by data, and addressed the company's strategic objectives perfectly. On the Wednesday before the retreat, Rob called me into his office for what he described as a final review of my presentation. His office was sterile and intimidating, with awards lining the walls and a large desk that created a barrier between him and anyone sitting across from it. He went through my presentation slide by slide, making minor suggestions and asking detailed questions about my methodology and projections. "Jessica," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this retreat is crucial for all of us. David will be making decisions about the Dallas expansion team, and I want to make sure we position ourselves as the obvious choice to lead that initiative." I nodded, understanding the subtext. Rob wanted to be selected to head the Dallas operation, and my presentation needed to support that objective. "I've been thinking," Rob continued, "about the leadership structure for Dallas. The right person would need to have proven themselves capable of handling complex implementations, managing client relationships, and building effective teams." He paused, looking directly at me. "Someone like you could be an excellent fit for a senior role in that expansion." The possibility was exciting. Leading the Dallas expansion would be a significant step toward my goal of becoming a regional director. It would mean more responsibility, a substantial salary increase, and the opportunity to build something from the ground up. I left Rob's office that day feeling optimistic about the future and excited about the possibilities that the retreat might bring. Friday afternoon arrived, and everyone piled into rental cars for the drive to Lake Travis Resort. The mood was festive, with people sharing snacks, playing music, and speculating about what surprises the company might have in store for us. I rode with Marcus, Emma, and Tyler, and we spent the drive discussing our presentations and our hopes for the weekend. The resort was even more beautiful than I remembered from the previous year. The main lodge was built in a rustic style with massive stone fireplaces and panoramic windows overlooking the lake. Our rooms were in smaller cabins, scattered throughout the property, each with a view of either the water or the surrounding hills. My cabin was peaceful and comfortable, with a small porch where I could sit and watch the sunset over the lake. The first evening was designed to be casual, a welcome barbecue with live music and informal networking. David gave a brief welcome speech, thanking everyone for their hard work and expressing his excitement about the year ahead. "This company is only as strong as the people in it," he said. "And looking around tonight, I can see that our future is incredibly bright." I mingled with colleagues from other departments, learning about their projects and sharing stories about our most challenging implementations. The atmosphere was relaxed and collaborative, exactly what a company retreat should be. Rob seemed to be in his element, working the crowd and having lengthy conversations with senior leadership. I noticed him spending considerable time with David, and several times I caught them looking in my direction while they talked. Saturday was packed with presentations and workshops. The morning sessions focused on company performance and strategic objectives, while the afternoon was dedicated to departmental presentations. My presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock, right after lunch, which was both a blessing and a curse. People would be alert, but also potentially sleepy from the meal. When my time came, I walked to the front of the main conference room feeling confident and prepared. The room was filled with colleagues, managers, and senior executives, including David, who sat in the front row with an encouraging smile. They began my presentation by outlining the current challenges in our client onboarding process, using specific examples and data to illustrate areas for improvement. The presentation went flawlessly. I could see people nodding as I explained my proposed solutions, and when I presented the projected outcomes, 30% reduction in onboarding time, 25% increase in client satisfaction, scores, and significant cost savings, the room was completely engaged. David asked several thoughtful questions, and other executives seemed genuinely interested in implementing my recommendations. As I concluded, David stood up and started clapping, which prompted the entire room to give me a standing ovation. "Jessica," David said, "this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that will drive our success in Dallas and beyond. Outstanding work." I felt a surge of pride and accomplishment, unlike anything I had experienced in my professional career. The rest of Saturday passed in a blur of positive feedback and congratulations. Colleagues approached me throughout the day to discuss my presentation and share their thoughts on implementation. Rob seemed pleased with the reception my presentation received, though he was quick to remind me that team success reflects well on leadership. I didn't mind his comment. I was too excited about the possibilities ahead. Saturday evening featured a formal dinner and award ceremony. The resort's dining room was elegantly decorated with soft lighting and floral arrangements, creating an atmosphere of celebration and appreciation. During dinner, David announced several promotions and recognitions, including the news that our department had exceeded its annual targets by 18%. As dessert was being served, David stood up for what everyone assumed would be his closing remarks. "Before we wrap up this incredible weekend," he began, "I want to share some exciting news about our Dallas expansion." The room fell silent, with anticipation. This expansion represents not just growth, but an opportunity to implement new approaches and innovative strategies that will set the standard for our entire organization. David paused, his eyes scanning the room before landing on our table. The success of this expansion will require exceptional leadership, someone who combines technical expertise with the ability to inspire and build effective teams, someone who has consistently demonstrated excellence and innovation. My heart began racing as I realized he might be talking about the very opportunity Rob and I had discussed. I'm pleased to announce that Jessica Martinez will be leading our client success initiatives for the Dallas expansion as our new Director of Client Success. The room erupted in applause, but I was too stunned to fully process what was happening. Director of Client Success. It was even better than I had hoped for. David continued. Jessica's presentation yesterday perfectly captured the vision we have for client relationships in our expanding organization. I stood up, my legs slightly shaky, and made my way to the front of the room where David waited with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. As we shook hands, he leaned in and said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. "Congratulations, partner. Welcome to the leadership team." The word partner hit me like lightning. In the context of TechForward's corporate structure, being called a partner meant equity, decision-making authority, and a seat at the table for major strategic discussions. It was beyond anything I had imagined possible at this stage of my career. As I looked out at the room full of applauding colleagues, I caught sight of Rob's face. The expression I saw there was unlike anything I had ever seen from him before. Shock, anger, and something that looked almost like betrayal. The rest of the evening passed in a whirlwind of congratulations, handshakes, and excited conversations about the Dallas expansion. People wanted to know about my vision for the new role, my timeline for implementation, and whether I would be hiring additional team members. I did my best to answer questions while still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Marcus, Emma, and Tyler were ecstatic, not just for my success, but because it likely meant opportunities for them as well. "Jess," Emma said, pulling me aside, "you absolutely deserve this. You've worked harder than anyone, and that presentation was phenomenal. Tyler nodded enthusiastically, adding, "And you know we're with you wherever this journey leads." As the evening wound down, I found myself on the resort's deck overlooking the lake, trying to process everything that had happened. The water was calm and reflective, mirroring the stars that were beginning to appear in the clear Texas sky. I felt grateful, excited, and slightly overwhelmed by the responsibility that lay ahead. It was then that my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, and I answered with excitement, eager to share my incredible news. "Mom, you'll never believe what just happened." But the voice that interrupted me wasn't my mother's. It was my Uncle Miguel, and the tone of his voice immediately told me that something was terribly wrong. "Jessica, mija, you need to sit down," he said gently. "Your mother is in the hospital. She collapsed at home this evening, and the doctors think it might be her heart." The world around me seemed to stop moving. The celebration, the promotion, the excitement, everything faded into the background as the only thing that mattered became getting to my mother as quickly as possible. The phone slipped from my trembling hands, clattering onto the wooden deck. Uncle Miguel's words echoed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Heart attack. Emergency surgery. Critical condition. I bent down to retrieve my phone, my vision blurring as tears began to form. The celebration sounds from inside the lodge seemed muffled and distant, as if I was suddenly underwater. I called Miguel back immediately, my fingers shaking as I dialed. "Uncle Miguel, please tell me everything. What hospital? How long has she been there? Is she conscious?" The questions tumbled out faster than he could answer them. He explained that Carmen had been found by her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had gone to check on her when she didn't show up for their evening walk. The paramedics had rushed her to San Antonio Medical Center, where she was currently in surgery. "The doctors said the next few hours are critical, mija," Miguel said softly. "You should come as soon as you can." I hung up and immediately started calculating. Lake Travis to San Antonio was roughly 2.5 hours if I drove fast and traffic cooperated. But it was already past 10 o'clock at night, and I had been drinking wine during dinner. The responsible thing would be to wait until morning. But the thought of my mother lying alone in a hospital bed while I slept comfortably at a resort was unbearable. I rushed back into the lodge, scanning the crowd for someone who could help me figure out transportation. The celebration was still in full swing, with people gathered around the bar sharing stories and laughing loudly. The contrast between their joy and my panic felt surreal. I spotted Marcus near the fireplace talking with some colleagues from the Dallas office. "Marcus!" I called out, probably louder than I intended. He turned toward me, and his smile immediately faded when he saw my expression. "Jessica, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I quickly explained the situation, my words coming out in a rushed, barely coherent stream. Marcus didn't hesitate for even a second. "I'm driving you," he said firmly. "I only had one beer with dinner, and that was hours ago. Let me grab my keys and we can leave right now." Emma and Tyler appeared beside us, having overheard our conversation. Emma immediately offered to pack my things from the cabin, while Tyler said he would handle any questions about my absence from the remaining retreat activities. As Emma headed to my cabin to gather my belongings, I knew I needed to inform Rob about my emergency departure. Despite everything that had happened between us, he was still my direct supervisor, and leaving the retreat without notifying him would be inappropriate. I found him near the resort's main entrance, engaged in an animated conversation with several other managers about the Dallas expansion plans. "Rob," I interrupted, probably more abruptly than I should have. "I need to speak with you privately. It's urgent." He looked annoyed at the interruption, but stepped away from his group. I quickly explained the situation about my mother's heart attack and my need to leave immediately for San Antonio. I expected sympathy, understanding, maybe even an offer to help with arrangements. Instead, Rob's expression hardened. He glanced back toward the group he had been talking with. then looked at me with what I can only describe as cold calculation. "Jessica, I understand this is personal, but you need to think about the bigger picture here. You just received a major promotion tonight. People are expecting to discuss details with you tomorrow. David specifically mentioned wanting to have breakfast with you to talk about the Dallas timeline." I stared at him in disbelief. "Rob, my mother might be dying. I'm not thinking about business right now." He stepped closer, lowering his voice but maintaining that same cold tone. "Look, I get that family is important, but this is your career we're talking about. You disappear tonight, miss the final day of the retreat, and what message does that send about your commitment, about your priorities?" The conversation felt like it was happening in slow motion. I couldn't believe that someone I had worked with for 5 years, someone who had seen my dedication and professionalism day after day, was questioning my priorities in a moment like this. "Rob, this is an emergency. Surely David and everyone else will understand that family comes first when someone is in critical condition." Rob shook his head, his expression becoming even more stern. "You're making a mistake, Jessica. You leave now and people will remember. They'll remember that when things got serious, when it really mattered. You weren't here. You weren't committed." He paused, and what he said next felt like a physical blow. "If you walk out that door tonight, don't expect to walk back into the same position on Monday." The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I felt my heart pounding, not just from the stress about my mother, but from the sheer impossibility of what Rob was suggesting. "Are you seriously threatening my job because I need to be with my mother in the hospital?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not threatening anything," Rob replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm simply pointing out that choices have consequences. This company needs leaders who understand that sometimes personal desires have to be set aside for professional responsibilities. If you can't handle that level of commitment, maybe you're not ready for a leadership role." Marcus appeared beside me, keys in hand, and a confused expression on his face as he sensed the tension in our conversation. "Jessica, I've got the car warmed up. Emma's loading your stuff. We should probably head out soon if we want to get to San Antonio at a reasonable time." I looked at Marcus, then back at Rob, trying to process the impossible choice I was being presented with. "Rob, please," I said, one last attempt at reasoning with him. "This is my mother, the woman who raised me, who supported every dream I've ever had. I would never forgive myself if something happened and I wasn't there because I was worried about appearances at a company retreat." Rob's expression didn't soften even slightly. "Then I guess you've made your choice," he said flatly. "Just remember, Jessica, in this business, there are always other talented people waiting for their opportunity. People who understand what commitment really means." With that, he turned and walked back toward his group, leaving me standing there in shock. Marcus had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "Jessica, that's insane. No reasonable person would expect you to stay here when your mother is having emergency surgery. He's bluffing." I wanted to believe Marcus was right, but something in Rob's tone and demeanor suggested he was deadly serious. I thought about David's words from earlier in the evening, calling me partner and welcoming me to the leadership team. Surely the CEO of the company wouldn't support Rob's unreasonable demands. The company had policies about family emergencies, didn't they? But then I remembered that this was Texas, an at-will employment state, where employees could be terminated for virtually any reason. Emma appeared with my packed bags, her face flushed from rushing around. "Everything's ready," she said, then noticed my expression. "What happened? You look even more upset than before." I quickly filled her in on my conversation with Rob, watching her face transform from concern to outrage. "He said what?" Emma's voice rose several octaves. "That's absolutely insane. No one could fault you for leaving to be with your mother during emergency surgery. Tyler needs to hear this." She immediately started texting Tyler, who appeared within minutes looking confused and angry. "There's no way he can follow through on that threat," Tyler said after I explained the situation. "You just got promoted by the CEO himself. Rob can't override that because you had a family emergency." His words were reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Rob's confidence suggested he had more power in this situation than any of us realized. The clock was ticking, and my mother was lying in a hospital bed 3 hours away. I made the only decision I could live with. "I'm going," I told my friends. "Whatever happens with work, I'll deal with it later. Right now, my mother needs me." Marcus nodded approvingly, while Emma and Tyler both promised to do whatever they could to support me with the fallout. The drive to San Antonio was a blur of dark highways, anxious phone calls to Uncle Miguel for updates, and Marcus's reassuring presence in the driver's seat. He didn't try to make small talk or offer false optimism. He just drove steadily through the night, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand when updates from the hospital were particularly frightening. We arrived at San Antonio Medical Center just after 1 a.m. The hospital was quiet except for the emergency department, which hummed with the subdued activity of late-night medical care. Uncle Miguel met us in the waiting room, his usually cheerful face etched with worry and exhaustion. He hugged me tightly, and I could feel how much he needed that comfort as much as I did. "She's still in surgery," he said quietly. "The doctors said it was a massive heart attack, but they caught it relatively quickly thanks to Mrs. Rodriguez. They're doing something called an angioplasty to open the blocked arteries." The medical term sounded foreign and frightening, but I clung to the word caught, hoping it meant we weren't too late. Marcus offered to stay with us, but I convinced him to drive back to Austin to get some sleep before work on Monday. "I'll take a bus back tomorrow or Monday, depending on how things go," I told him. "Thank you for getting me here. I don't know what I would have done without you." He hugged me goodbye and made me promise to call with any updates. The next few hours passed with agonizing slowness. Uncle Miguel and I sat in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, drinking terrible hospital coffee and taking turns pacing the hallway. Around 4 a.m, a tired-looking surgeon in scrubs finally approached us. Dr. Martinez, no relation despite the shared name, explained that the surgery had been successful, but my mother's condition remained critical. "The next 24 to 48 hours will be crucial," Dr. Martinez explained. "We were able to clear the blockages and restore blood flow to her heart, but there was some damage. We won't know the full extent until she's stable and we can run more tests." The words were cautiously optimistic, but the underlying message was clear. My mother wasn't out of danger yet. I was finally allowed to see her around 6 a.m. The ICU was a maze of beeping machines, blinking monitors, and nurses, moving quietly between rooms. My mother looked so small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to various machines that were monitoring her heart rhythm, blood pressure, and oxygen levels. Her skin was pale, and she appeared to be sleeping peacefully despite the medical chaos surrounding her. I sat beside her bed and gently took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines. "I'm here, Mom," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Her fingers felt cold, but I imagined I felt a slight squeeze in response. The nurse assured me that talking to her was good, even if she couldn't respond. So I began telling her about the retreat, about my promotion, about everything except Rob's ultimatum. As Sunday morning progressed, my mother's vital signs remained stable, which the doctors considered encouraging. Uncle Miguel convinced me to take a break and get some real food from the hospital cafeteria. As I sat alone with a mediocre breakfast sandwich, I finally checked my phone for messages from the retreat. There were several texts from Emma and Tyler with updates from the final day of activities. Apparently, Rob had announced to their department that I had chosen to leave early and would not be participating in the closing presentations. When people asked about family emergency, Rob had simply said that personal situations had required my departure and changed the subject. More troubling was a message from Emma saying that during the final leadership meeting, Rob had made comments about commitment levels and reliability under pressure, without mentioning my name specifically, but in a context that made it clear he was referring to me. David had apparently looked confused by Rob's comments but hadn't asked for clarification. The bus ride back to Austin on Monday morning was one of the longest trips of my life. My mother had regained consciousness Sunday evening and was stable, enough that the doctors felt comfortable with me returning to work, though she would remain in the hospital for at least another week. She had squeezed my hand and whispered, "Go take care of your career, mija. I'll be fine." I arrived at the TechForward office Monday morning with a mixture of exhaustion, anxiety, and determination. I had rehearsed what I would say to Rob, how I would explain the situation to David, and how I would demonstrate that my commitment to the company remained unwavering despite the family emergency. I was prepared for a difficult conversation, but I was not prepared for what actually awaited me. As I walked through the office, I noticed that several colleagues seemed to avoid making eye contact with me. The usual morning greetings felt forced and uncomfortable. Emma caught my eye from across the room and gestured toward the conference room where Rob's office was located. Her expression told me everything I needed to know. Whatever was coming was going to be bad. I knocked on Rob's office door and heard his familiar, "Come in." As I entered, I immediately noticed that his usual desk items had been rearranged, and there was a thick folder sitting prominently in the center of his desk. Rob looked up from his computer with an expression that was somehow both satisfied and regretful. "Jessica," he said, his tone formal and distant. "Please, sit down. We need to discuss your status with the company." The word status sent a chill down my spine. I sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where just a few weeks earlier we had discussed my career prospects and the Dallas expansion. "Rob, I want to explain about this weekend," I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. "Jessica, I think your actions this weekend spoke clearly enough. When faced with a choice between personal convenience and professional responsibility, you chose to abandon your team and your commitments." The characterization of my mother's heart attack as personal convenience was so outrageous that I was momentarily speechless. "Rob, my mother had a heart attack. She had emergency surgery. This wasn't a personal convenience. It was a family crisis." Rob opened the folder on his desk and pulled out several documents. "I've spoken with David about the situation, and we both agree that your behavior this weekend raises serious questions about your readiness for a leadership position." The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed his words. "You spoke with David? What exactly did you tell him?" Rob's expression remained neutral, but I detected a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. I explained that when given your first real test as a leader, when the company needed you to demonstrate your commitment to your new role, you chose to leave. I explained that leadership sometimes requires personal sacrifice. "Did you mention that my mother was having emergency heart surgery?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. Rob shrugged slightly. "I mentioned that you had a family situation that you felt required your immediate attention. The specific details weren't really relevant to the leadership discussion. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality where basic human decency had been suspended." "Rob, the specific details are absolutely relevant. No reasonable person would expect someone to stay at a company retreat while their mother was having life-threatening surgery." Rob leaned back in his chair, assuming the same authoritative posture I had seen him use when delivering bad news to clients. "Jessica, I understand you're emotional about this, but you need to see the bigger picture. In leadership positions, there are always going to be conflicts between personal desires and professional obligations. The company needs to know that its leaders will prioritize business needs when it matters most." He pulled out another document from the folder. "After careful consideration, David and I have decided that the Director of Client Success position requires someone with demonstrated reliability and unwavering commitment. The blood drained from my face as I realized what he was saying. You're taking away my promotion? Rob nodded slowly, as if he were delivering regrettable but necessary news. We're restructuring the Dallas expansion leadership. Someone else will be taking the director role. He paused for maximum impact. Someone who has shown that they understand what leadership commitment really means. Who? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. I'll be stepping into the Director of Client Success role myself, Rob said, and there was no mistaking the satisfaction in his voice now. David agrees that my experience and demonstrated reliability make me the logical choice for such a critical position. The pieces of his manipulation became crystal clear. Rob had wanted the Dallas position for himself all along. When David promoted me over him, he had seen my family emergency as an opportunity to undermine my credibility and position himself as the more reliable choice. He had deliberately misrepresented the situation to David, framing my response to a genuine crisis as a lack of commitment. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "You're punishing me for having a family emergency. You're twisting a situation where any decent human being would have done exactly what I did." Rob maintained his calm, professional demeanor, which somehow made the situation even more infuriating. "Jessica, I understand you're disappointed, but this decision is final. However, we do value your contributions to the company, and we'd like to offer you a path forward." He pulled out yet another document. "We're prepared to keep you in your current Senior Implementation Manager role, with a clear understanding that future advancement opportunities will depend on demonstrated reliability and commitment." The condescension in his tone was unbearable. He was offering to let me keep the job I already had, as if it were some generous gesture after destroying the promotion I had earned. "And if I don't accept these terms?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Rob's expression became even more serious. "Well, that would be unfortunate. The company has significant investments in the Dallas expansion, and we need team members who are fully committed to success. If you can't embrace the values and expectations we've outlined, then perhaps TechForward isn't the right fit for your career goals." The threat was clear. Accept the demotion and humiliation, or lose my job entirely. I sat in that chair for what felt like an eternity, staring at Rob's satisfied face and trying to process the complete destruction of everything I had worked for. 5 years of dedication, countless late nights, successful projects, client relationships, team building, all of it dismissed because I had chosen to be with my dying mother instead of networking at a company retreat. "I need time to think about this," I finally said, standing up from the chair. Rob nodded magnanimously. "Of course, take all the time you need, but I'll need an answer by end of business today. The Dallas project timeline is aggressive, and we need to finalize the team structure immediately." As I walked out of Rob's office, I felt like I was in a daze. The hallway seemed longer than usual, and every step felt like I was walking through quicksand. Emma and Tyler were waiting near my desk, their faces full of concern and barely contained outrage. They had clearly been waiting for me to emerge from Rob's office, and one look at my expression told them everything they needed to know. "He didn't," Emma whispered, but the statement sounded more like a question. I nodded slowly, still trying to fully comprehend what had just happened. Tyler's face turned red with anger. "This is insane! He can't do this! There have to be policies, legal protections, something." Marcus appeared from his cubicle, having overheard our conversation. "Jessica, this is wrong on every level. We all know what really happened this weekend. You had a family emergency, and any reasonable person would have done exactly what you did." His words were comforting, but they didn't change the reality of my situation. I spent the rest of the morning in a fog, mechanically responding to emails and trying to process the magnitude of Rob's betrayal. The more I thought about it, the the more I realized how calculated his response had been. He had seen an opportunity to eliminate me as competition for the promotion he wanted, and he had seized it without hesitation or conscience. Around lunchtime, I decided I needed to speak with David directly. If Rob had misrepresented the situation, maybe I could set the record straight. Maybe David, who had always seemed like a reasonable and compassionate leader, would understand the impossible position I had been placed in. I walked to the executive floor and asked David's assistant if I could speak with him briefly about an urgent matter. "I'm sorry, Jessica," she said with genuine sympathy in her voice. "David is in back-to-back meetings preparing for the Dallas expansion announcement. He asked me to tell anyone who inquired that all questions about the new organizational structure should be directed to Rob." The message was clear. David had delegated the situation entirely to Rob and didn't want to be involved in the details. As I rode the elevator back to my floor, I felt a crushing sense of isolation and betrayal. The company I had devoted 5 years of my life to, the leadership I had respected and trusted, had abandoned me at the first sign of inconvenience. My commitment, my results, my proven track record, none of it mattered when weighed against the political maneuvering of someone willing to exploit a family tragedy for personal gain. The afternoon dragged by with painful slowness. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept returning to Rob's ultimatum and the impossible choice he had presented. Accept humiliation and stay, or maintain my dignity and lose everything I had built. Either way, my trust in the company and my belief in fair treatment had been permanently shattered. As 5 o'clock approached, I realized that Rob would be expecting an answer to his ultimatum. I had spent the entire day hoping for some alternative, some way to fight back or appeal to higher authority, but it was clear that Rob had positioned himself as the sole decision-maker in my fate. The company I thought I knew, the values I thought we shared, had revealed themselves to be illusions. At exactly 5 o'clock, I walked back into Rob's office. He looked up from his computer with an expectant expression, clearly confident about what my answer would be. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across his face, making him appear even more calculating than usual. I stood in front of his desk, my hands steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. "I've made my decision," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I had expected. "I won't be accepting your terms." Rob's eyebrows raised slightly, but his expression remained controlled. "I see. And you understand what that means for your future with TechForward?" I nodded slowly, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. "I understand perfectly, but I also understand that I can't work for someone who would exploit a family tragedy for personal gain. I can't be part of a company that punishes employees for having basic human decency." Rob leaned back in his chair, studying me with what appeared to be mild curiosity rather than concern. "That's unfortunate, Jessica. I had hoped you would see the bigger picture and choose to grow from this experience." His tone was patronizing, as if I were a child refusing to learn an important lesson. "I'll need you to clear out your desk and complete your exit paperwork with Linda in HR. Security will escort you out once you're finished." The casual cruelty of his words was breathtaking. 5 years of my life reduced to a security escort and a cardboard box. "I'll need a few minutes to pack my personal items and say goodbye to my team," I said, maintaining my composure despite wanting to scream. Rob glanced at his watch impatiently. "Make it quick. I have a conference call with the Dallas team in 30 minutes to discuss the new leadership structure." The emphasis he placed on new leadership was clearly intended to twist the knife, but instead it strengthened my resolve. I turned and walked out of his office for the last time, closing the door behind me with deliberate gentleness. The open office area was mostly empty, as many people had already left for the day. Emma, Marcus, and Tyler were still at their desks, clearly waiting to hear the outcome of my meeting with Rob. When they saw my expression, they immediately gathered around my workstation without needing any explanation. "He actually did it," Emma said, her voice filled with disbelief and anger. "He actually fired you for going to see your mother in the hospital." I began pulling personal items from my desk drawers: photos, a small plant that Emma had given me for my birthday, a coffee mug with the Austin skyline that my mother had bought me during one of her visits. "This is insane," Tyler said, his voice rising. "There have to be wrongful termination laws. This can't be legal." Marcus was already pulling up information on his computer, searching for employment attorneys and workers' rights organizations. "Tyler's right. There's no way this is legal. Family medical emergencies are protected under federal law." As I carefully wrapped my belongings in tissue paper from my desk drawer, I explained the terms of Rob's ultimatum and his manipulation of the situation with David. With each detail I shared, my friend's expressions grew more outraged and determined. "We need to document everything," Emma said, pulling out her phone. "Times, dates, witnesses, everything Rob said." "I already started," I replied, showing them screenshots I had taken of text messages and emails related to the retreat and my mother's emergency. "I learned a long time ago to keep records of important conversations. I just never thought I'd need them for something like this." The irony wasn't lost on me that my own professional thoroughness might be the key to fighting back. Linda Foster from HR appeared beside our group, her face showing genuine sympathy and embarrassment. Linda was in her 50s, a kind woman who had always treated employees with respect and fairness. "Jessica, I'm so sorry about this situation. Could we handle the paperwork in my office? I think it would be more private than doing it out here." I followed Linda to the HR office, carrying my small box of personal items. The office was warm and welcoming, with family photos and plants that created a stark contrast to Rob's sterile workspace. Linda closed the door and gestured for me to sit in the comfortable chair across from her desk. "Before we start with the official paperwork," Linda said quietly, "I want you to know that I had no advance notice of this decision. Rob called me an hour ago and asked me to prepare termination documents. When I asked for the reason, he said it was related to reliability issues and failure to meet leadership expectations." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "I asked if there had been any disciplinary actions or performance issues documented, and he said that wasn't necessary for this type of situation." The fact that Linda was sharing this information suggested she was deeply troubled by the circumstances. "Linda, what exactly did Rob tell you about why I left the retreat?" I asked. Her expression became even more concerned as she consulted her notes. "He said you had decided to leave early due to a personal matter, and that your departure demonstrated a lack of commitment to your new leadership role." Linda looked up from her notes. "He never mentioned anything about a family emergency or a medical situation. When I asked for more details, he said the specifics weren't relevant to the termination decision." This confirmed what I had suspected about Rob's manipulation of the situation. He had deliberately omitted crucial details to make his decision appear reasonable to HR and senior management. "Linda, my mother had a massive heart attack Saturday night during the retreat. She had emergency surgery and I left to be with her at the hospital. I notified Rob immediately and he threatened my job if I left." Linda's face went pale as she absorbed this information. "Oh my God, Jessica. That changes everything. Family medical emergencies are absolutely protected under our policies and federal law. Rob never mentioned any of that." She immediately began pulling out different forms and policy manuals. "This is completely inappropriate termination. You have strong grounds for legal action." "I was afraid that's what this was really about," I said, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Rob wanted the Dallas promotion for himself. When David chose me instead, he saw my family emergency as an opportunity to eliminate the competition. Linda was furiously taking notes as I spoke, clearly documenting everything for potential legal proceedings. "Jessica, I need to ask you some specific questions for documentation purposes. Did Rob explicitly threaten your job if you left to be with your mother?" I recounted the exact conversation, including Rob's words about choices having consequences and his comment about people who understand what commitment really means. Linda's expression grew more troubled with each detail. This is potentially a violation of Federal Family and Medical Leave Act protections, as well as our own company policies about family emergencies, Linda said. I'm going to recommend that you contact an employment attorney immediately. I'm also going to document this entire conversation and flag this case for review by our legal department. Linda printed out the standard termination paperwork, but she also provided me with copies of company policies related to family leave, emergency situations, and wrongful termination procedures. I'm not supposed to give legal advice, she said quietly, but I will say that you should document everything that happened this weekend, every conversation, every text message, every witness who saw or heard what transpired. As Linda handed me the termination documents, she included a small slip of paper with a phone number written on it. This is my sister's information. She's an employment attorney here in Austin, and she specializes in wrongful termination cases. Tell her I referred you, and she'll see you immediately. The gesture was risky for Linda professionally, but it showed the kind of courage and integrity that Rob had accused me of lacking. I returned to my desk to finish gathering my belongings, where Emma, Marcus, and Tyler were waiting with barely contained fury. Word had apparently spread through the office about my termination, and several other colleagues had gathered around, expressing shock and outrage. Sarah from accounting looked like she was about to cry, while Mike from technical support was pacing angrily and muttering about corporate injustice. This is wrong on every level, Sarah said, hugging me tightly. Everyone knows how dedicated you are. You've worked weekends, holidays, late nights. You've covered for people when they needed help. And they fire you for being with your mother. In the hospital? Her words were echoing the sentiments of everyone around us. Mike stepped forward, his expression serious and determined. Jessica, I want you to know that we're all willing to be witnesses if you decide to fight this. What Rob did is unconscionable, and we won't let him get away with it. Several other colleagues nodded in agreement, offering their support and expressing their willingness to testify about my work ethic and the circumstances of my departure. As I packed the last of my personal items, Emma pulled me aside for a private conversation. Jess, I need to tell you something. This morning, before you got back from San Antonio, Rob called a team meeting. He told us that you had chosen to prioritize personal matters over professional responsibilities, and that the company needed to reevaluate your leadership potential. Emma's voice was shaking with anger. When I asked about your mother's surgery, he said that personal circumstances weren't relevant to business decisions. The systematic nature of Rob's deception was becoming clearer. He had not only misrepresented the situation to David and Linda, but he had also begun spreading his version of events to my own team, attempting to undermine my reputation and justify his actions. Did anyone else speak up? I asked. Emma nodded vigorously. Tyler immediately challenged him. He said that any decent human being would have done exactly what you did, and that Rob's characterization of the situation was completely unfair. Marcus backed him up, saying that you were the most dedicated employee he'd ever worked with. Emma paused, looking around to make sure no one was listening. Rob got really angry and said that emotional reactions were exactly why some people weren't cut out for leadership roles. The more I learned about Rob's behavior, the more convinced I became that this wasn't just about the Dallas promotion. This was about power, control, and his fundamental belief that employees should sacrifice everything for the company's benefit. He had used my moment of vulnerability to advance his own agenda, regardless of the human cost. Tyler approached us, with his laptop, showing me something he had discovered during his research. Jessica, I found some interesting information about wrongful termination laws in Texas. While it's an at-will employment state, there are specific protections for employees who need time off for family medical emergencies. What Rob did appears to violate both state and federal regulations. Marcus joined our conversation, having printed out several pages of legal information. I also found some precedent cases where employees successfully sued for wrongful termination after being fired for attending to family medical crises. The courts have consistently ruled that employers cannot retaliate against employees for fulfilling basic family obligations during emergencies. The support and research my colleagues were providing was overwhelming and deeply moving. These people, who had nothing to gain and potentially something to lose by supporting me, were willing to stand up for what was right. It reminded me why I had loved working at TechForward, not because of the company itself, but because of the people who made it a community. As I prepared to leave the office for the last time, David Thompson appeared in our area. He looked uncomfortable and slightly confused, as if he wasn't entirely sure why he was there. "Jessica," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "I heard about the situation with your position. I wanted to speak with you before you left." The conversation I had hoped for all day was finally happening, but under circumstances I never could have imagined. "David, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I think there may have been some miscommunication about what happened this weekend." David nodded, but his expression remained guarded. "Rob explained that you left the retreat early due to personal matters and that there were concerns about your commitment to the leadership role." David's words were careful and formal, suggesting he was repeating what he had been told rather than expressing his own opinion. He felt that the Dallas expansion required someone with demonstrated reliability under pressure. I took a deep breath, knowing that this might be my only chance to set the record straight with the person who had originally believed in my potential. "David, my mother had a massive heart attack Saturday night during the retreat. She was rushed into emergency surgery, and the doctors said the next 24 hours were critical. I left to be with her at the hospital, not for personal convenience or lack of commitment." David's expression changed immediately, showing genuine surprise and concern. "Rob never mentioned anything about a medical emergency. He said you had a family situation that required your attention, but he characterized it as a choice between personal and professional priorities." The fact that David was hearing these details for the first time confirmed the extent of Rob's manipulation. "David, I would never abandon my responsibilities for anything less than a life-threatening emergency. You've seen my dedication over the past 5 years. You know that I've worked weekends, holidays, and late nights whenever the company needed me. The only reason I left that retreat was because my mother might have died if I wasn't there." My voice was steady, but I could feel the emotion behind my words. David was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing this new information and reconsidering the decisions that had been made. "Jessica, if what you're telling me is accurate, then there's been a serious misunderstanding about the circumstances of your departure." He glanced around at my colleagues, who were watching the conversation with intense interest. "It's absolutely accurate," Emma interjected, unable to contain herself any longer. "We all know what happened. Jessica got a call that her mother was having emergency heart surgery, and she left immediately to be with her. Any decent human being would have done the same thing." Tyler and Marcus nodded in agreement, adding their voices to support my version of events. David looked troubled and uncertain, as if he was realizing that he had made a significant decision based on incomplete or misleading information. "I need to review this situation more carefully. There may have been some miscommunication about the circumstances." He paused, looking directly at me. "Jessica, I want you to know that if there's been an error in judgment, the company will make it right." While David's words were encouraging, I realized that the damage had already been done. Even if he reversed Rob's decision, I would still be working for a company where someone in a position of authority could manipulate situations for personal gain. The trust that had been broken wasn't just between Rob and me. It was between me and the entire organization. "David, I appreciate your willingness to review the situation, but I think the damage has already been done. The fact that Rob could misrepresent a family medical emergency to serve his own agenda tells me everything I need to know about the company's values and leadership structure. David looked genuinely pained by my words, but he didn't attempt to argue with my assessment. I understand your perspective, Jessica. If you decide to pursue legal action over this situation, the company will cooperate fully with any investigation. David's words suggested that he recognized the seriousness of what had occurred and the potential legal ramifications for TechForward. I want you to know that this doesn't reflect the values I try to instill in this organization. As David walked away, looking troubled and confused, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. The conversation had confirmed that Rob had deliberately deceived the CEO about the circumstances of my departure, but it had also revealed how easily the company's leadership could be manipulated by someone willing to exploit a family tragedy for personal advancement. Emma, Marcus, and Tyler gathered around me as I picked up my box of personal belongings for the final time. "This isn't over," Tyler said firmly. "We're going to make sure everyone knows what really happened here. Rob can't be allowed to get away with this." Marcus nodded in agreement, adding that he planned to document everything that had occurred and make it available to any legal proceedings. "And we're going to keep looking for new opportunities," Emma added. "If you decide to start somewhere else, we want to come with you. Working for Rob after what he did to you would be impossible." The loyalty and support of my colleagues was overwhelming, but it also made leaving even more difficult. As I walked toward the elevator for the last time, carrying my small box of personal items, I turned back to look at the office where I had spent 5 years building what I thought was a meaningful career. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting the same harsh illumination that had always made late nights feel surreal. The familiar sounds of keyboards clicking and phones ringing continued as if nothing significant had happened. But everything had changed. I had entered that building this morning as a senior implementation manager with a bright future and the respect of my colleagues. I was leaving as someone who had been betrayed by her supervisor and abandoned by the company she had served faithfully. The person walking into that elevator was different from the person who had walked out of Rob's office that morning. Stronger in some ways, but also more aware of how quickly trust could be shattered and loyalty could be exploited. The elevator descended slowly, giving me time to process the magnitude of what had occurred. In less than 24 hours, I had gone from being promoted to partner by the CEO to being terminated for having basic human decency. The injustice of it was staggering, but there was also something liberating about finally seeing Rob's true character and the company's willingness to enable his behavior. As the elevator doors opened in the lobby, I stepped out into the late afternoon Austin sunshine. The familiar sounds of downtown traffic and the distant music from various venues created a soundtrack that felt both comforting and bittersweet. This city had been my professional home for 5 years, and now I was starting over with nothing but a cardboard box and the knowledge that I had done the right thing. I walked to my car, placed the box in the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel for several minutes, not yet ready to drive away from this chapter of my life. My phone buzzed with text messages from Emma, Tyler, and Marcus, each expressing their continued support and their determination to help me fight back against Rob's injustice. Their friendship was the one unquestionably positive thing to emerge from this devastating day. As I finally started the engine and pulled out of the parking garage, I made a mental note to call Linda's sister, the employment attorney, first thing in the morning. I also decided to visit my mother in San Antonio that evening, both to check on her recovery and to tell her about what had happened. She would be furious about Rob's behavior, but she would also remind me that integrity was more valuable than any job, and that sometimes losing something you thought you wanted was the first step toward finding something better. The drive home gave me time to begin processing the emotional magnitude of what had occurred. I felt anger at Rob's manipulation, disappointment in David's failure to get the full story before making such a significant decision, and sadness about leaving colleagues who had become genuine friends. But underneath all those emotions was something unexpected, relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about meeting Rob's expectations or navigating his political games. The worst thing that could reasonably happen had already occurred, and I had survived it with my integrity intact. As I pulled into my apartment complex in Cedar Park, I realized that while this day had ended one chapter of my life, it had also opened the door to possibilities I hadn't even considered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight I would rest in the knowledge that I had chosen family over career advancement, human decency over political convenience, and integrity over security. Those were choices I could live with, regardless of what the future might hold. Tuesday morning arrived with the jarring reality that I had nowhere to go. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to set an alarm, check emails, or review my calendar for client meetings. The silence in my apartment felt both peaceful and unsettling. Luna seemed confused by my presence during her usual morning routine, tilting her head as if asking why I wasn't rushing around getting ready for work. I made coffee and sat on my small balcony, watching the sunrise paint the Austin skyline in shades of orange and pink. The city was waking up, beginning another day of commerce and ambition, while I sat in limbo between my destroyed past and an uncertain future. My phone had been buzzing since early morning with messages from Emma, Marcus, and Tyler, all checking on me and sharing updates about the chaos Rob's decision had created at TechForward. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called Patricia Hayes, the employment attorney Linda had recommended. Her assistant scheduled an appointment for 11 that morning, explaining that Patricia had specifically asked to see me as soon as possible after Linda's call the previous evening. The urgency in the assistant's voice suggested that Linda had conveyed the severity of my situation effectively. Patricia's office was located in a sleek high-rise in downtown Austin with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of the Texas State Capitol building. The waiting area was tastefully decorated with modern art and comfortable furniture that suggested both success and approachability. When Patricia emerged to greet me, she was a woman in her late 40s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a handshake that conveyed confidence and determination. "Jessica, please come in," she said, leading me into her spacious office. "Linda told me about your situation last night, and I've already begun researching the relevant statutes and precedents. What happened to you appears to be a textbook case of wrongful termination, with several potential violations of both state and federal law." Patricia's office was impressive, with law books lining the walls, diplomas from prestigious universities, and photos showing her with various civic leaders and judges. She gestured for me to sit in a comfortable leather chair across from her mahogany desk, which was covered with legal documents and yellow legal pads filled with handwritten notes. "Before we discuss legal strategy," Patricia said, "I want to hear your complete account of what happened, starting with your mother's medical emergency and ending with your termination yesterday. Don't leave out any details, no matter how minor they might seem." In wrongful termination cases, the small details often make the biggest difference. I spent the next hour recounting every aspect of the weekend's events and Monday's termination. Patricia took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific conversations, timelines, and witnesses. When I described Rob's ultimatum about choosing between my mother and my career, her expression darkened with professional anger. "That statement alone constitutes a violation of the Family and Medical Leave Act," Patricia said, making emphatic notes on her legal pad. "Federal law specifically protects employees who need time off for serious family medical conditions. Your supervisor's threat to terminate you for attending to your mother's emergency surgery is illegal, regardless of the timing or circumstances." Patricia pulled out a thick file folder and began showing me relevant case law and statutes. Texas is indeed an at-will employment state, but that doesn't mean employers can terminate employees for any reason whatsoever. There are specific protections for family medical emergencies, and courts have consistently ruled that employers cannot retaliate against employees for fulfilling basic family obligations during health crises. The legal information was complex, but Patricia explained it in terms I could understand. She showed me cases where employees had been awarded substantial settlements for similar wrongful terminations, and she outlined the various claims we could potentially pursue against TechForward. The strength of my case was apparently much stronger than I had realized. Jessica, based on what you've told me and the documentation you've provided, I believe we have an excellent chance of success if we decide to pursue legal action, Patricia said. However, I want you to understand that litigation can be time-consuming, emotionally draining, and expensive. Before we make any decisions about filing suit, I'd like to try a different approach. Patricia explained that she often achieved better results for clients through direct negotiation with employers rather than immediate litigation. Sometimes, a well-crafted letter from an attorney can accomplish more than months of court proceedings. Companies often prefer to resolve these situations quietly, rather than face public scrutiny and potential damage to their reputation. She outlined a strategy where she would contact TechForward's legal department directly, presenting the facts of my case and giving them an opportunity to resolve the matter voluntarily. If they're smart, they'll recognize the strength of your case and offer a substantial settlement along with restoration of your position. If they refuse to negotiate reasonably, then we proceed with formal litigation. The approach made sense, and Patricia's confidence was reassuring. She asked me to gather additional documentation, including any performance reviews, emails related to my work on the Lone Star retail project, and statements from colleagues who could testify about my dedication and work ethic. The stronger our documentation, the more likely they are to settle quickly and generously. As I left Patricia's office, I felt a sense of empowerment that had been absent since Saturday night. For the first time since Rob's betrayal, I had a clear plan of action and professional support from someone who understood the legal system. The attorney's fees would be substantial, but Patricia had explained that most wrongful termination cases included attorney fee recovery, meaning TechForward would ultimately pay for my legal representation if we were successful. I spent the afternoon gathering the documentation Patricia had requested, printing emails, scanning performance reviews, and organizing the evidence of my professional achievements at TechForward. The process was both therapeutic and infuriating, as I reviewed years of positive feedback, successful projects, and client testimonials that stood in stark contrast to Rob's characterization of my reliability issues. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The caller ID showed a Dallas area code, which made me curious enough to answer despite my general reluctance to talk with unknown callers. "Hello, is this Jessica Martinez?" The voice was professional and friendly, with a slight southern accent. "Yes, this is Jessica. Who's calling?" I asked, settling into my living room chair and absently petting Luna, who had claimed her usual spot on the couch beside me. "This is Amanda Richardson, CEO of Innovate Tech Systems here in Dallas. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Name Innovate Tech Systems was familiar. They were one of TechForward's primary competitors in the cloud solutions market. Amanda Richardson was something of a legend in the industry, having built Innovate Tech from a small startup into a major player in just 8 years. Her reputation for innovation and employee-focused leadership was well known throughout the Texas tech community. "I heard about what happened at TechForward," Amanda continued, "and I wanted to reach out personally to discuss a potential opportunity with Innovate Tech. Would you be available to meet for coffee tomorrow afternoon? I think you might be interested in what we're building here." The timing of Amanda's call seemed almost surreal. Less than 24 hours after losing my job, one of the industry's most respected leaders was reaching out with a potential opportunity. "How did you hear about my situation?" I asked, genuinely curious about how news had traveled so quickly. Amanda laughed warmly. "The tech community in Texas is smaller than people think, especially among senior professionals. Word travels fast when someone with your reputation gets treated unfairly. I've been following your career for a while, particularly your work on the Lone Star retail implementation. That was an impressive project. The fact that Amanda Richardson had been aware of my work was both flattering and surprising. Innovate Tech was significantly larger than TechForward, with offices in multiple states and a client roster that included some of the biggest corporations in the Southwest. I'd be very interested in meeting with you, I said. Tomorrow afternoon works perfectly. We arranged to meet at a trendy coffee shop in downtown Dallas at 2 o'clock. Amanda suggested a place called Common Grounds, which she described as quiet enough for a serious conversation, but informal enough to feel comfortable. I think you'll find our approach to business and employee treatment quite different from what you experienced at TechForward, she said before ending the call. That evening, I drove to San Antonio to visit my mother, who was recovering well from her surgery, but still weak and tired. The 3-hour drive gave me time to process the day's developments and prepare for what might be a life-changing conversation with Amanda Richardson. The landscape between Austin and San Antonio was beautiful in the late afternoon light, with rolling hills and wildflowers creating a peaceful backdrop for reflection. My mother was sitting up in her hospital bed when I arrived, looking much better than she had during my weekend visit. Her color had returned, and she was alert and cheerful despite the various monitors and IV lines still connected to her. "Mija," she said, reaching for my hand. "You look tired. How are things at work?" I had dreaded this conversation, knowing how upset my mother would be when she learned what Rob had done. I explained the entire situation, from his ultimatum at the retreat to my termination on Monday. As I had expected, my mother's face showed a progression of emotions: shock, anger, and finally fierce maternal protectiveness. "That man is evil," she said, her voice stronger than it had been since the surgery. "To use my heart attack as an excuse to destroy your career is unforgivable. But Mija, you did exactly the right thing. I'm proud of you for choosing family over that horrible job." Her words were comforting, but I could see the guilt in her eyes as she blamed herself for causing my professional problems. "Mom, none of this is your fault," I said firmly. "You didn't choose to have a heart attack, and I didn't choose to work for someone who would exploit a family emergency for personal gain. This is entirely Rob's responsibility, and he's going to face the consequences for what he did." I told my mother about my meeting with Patricia Hayes and the potential legal action against TechForward. I also mentioned Amanda Richardson's unexpected call and the opportunity to meet with Innovate Tech the following day. My mother's expression brightened considerably as she realized that my career might not be over, but rather redirected towards something better. "Sometimes God closes one door to open a better one," my mother said, squeezing my hand. "Maybe this terrible thing happened so you could find a company that actually values good people. You're too talented and too good a person to waste your life working for someone like that Rob person." The visit with my mother reminded me of why I had made the choices I made. Family relationships and personal integrity were more important than career advancement or financial security. Rob had tried to force me to choose between my values and my job, and I had chosen my values without hesitation. That choice had led to short-term pain, but it had also preserved my ability to look at myself in the mirror with respect. The drive back to Austin was peaceful, with classical music on the radio and the Texas Hill Country rolling by in the darkness. I thought about the phone call from Amanda Richardson and what it might mean for my future. Innovate Tech had a reputation for innovation, ethical business practices, and exceptional employee treatment. If the opportunity was genuine, it could represent not just a new job, but a chance to work for a leader who understood that business success and human decency were not mutually exclusive. Wednesday morning, I woke up feeling more optimistic than I had since the weekend. Emma had texted me the night before with news that Rob was already struggling with the Dallas expansion project, apparently having difficulty understanding the technical specifications I had developed for the client. onboarding system. The irony was not lost on me that he had destroyed my career to get a position he was unqualified to handle effectively. I spent the morning preparing for my meeting with Amanda Richardson, researching Innovate Tech's recent projects, financial performance, and corporate culture. The company's website featured testimonials from employees about the positive work, environment, opportunities for professional growth, and leadership's commitment to work-life balance. It was exactly the opposite of the toxic environment Rob had created at TechForward. The drive to Dallas took about 3 hours, giving me time to mentally prepare for what could be the most important business meeting of my career. Common Grounds turned out to be exactly as Amanda had described. A stylish coffee shop with comfortable seating areas, excellent acoustics for conversation, and an atmosphere that felt professional but not intimidating. Amanda Richardson was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, easily recognizable from the photos I had seen in industry publications. She was a woman in her early 40s with short auburn hair, intelligent eyes, and a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. She stood up to greet me with a firm handshake and a genuine expression of sympathy. "Jessica, thank you for making the drive up here. I know this has been a difficult week for you, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me." Amanda's tone was warm and professional, striking exactly the right balance for our unusual circumstances. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering you a coffee. I heard you prefer dark roast with a splash of cream." The fact that Amanda had researched my coffee preferences suggested she had done considerable homework about me personally and professionally. We settled into comfortable chairs, and Amanda immediately addressed the elephant in the room. "I want to start by saying that what happened to you at TechForward was absolutely unconscionable. No employee should ever be forced to choose between their career and their family during a medical emergency." Amanda's directness was refreshing after the political games and hidden agendas I had grown accustomed to at TechForward. "I appreciate your support," I said. "It's been a challenging few days, but I'm trying to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on what happened." "That's exactly the attitude I was hoping to hear," Amanda said, pulling out a tablet and opening what appeared to be a detailed presentation. "Jessica, I've been following your career for the past 2 years, ever since the Lone Star retail implementation. That project was a masterpiece of technical execution and client relationship management. The fact that you completed it on time and under budget while maintaining perfect client satisfaction scores was remarkable." Amanda showed me detailed analysis of my work at TechForward, including metrics I hadn't even realized were being tracked by outside observers. Innovate Tech had apparently been monitoring TechForward's major projects and had identified me as one of their top performers long before my termination. "We've been looking for someone with your exact skill set to lead our new client experience division," Amanda continued. The position Amanda described was beyond anything I had imagined possible at this stage of my career. The client experience division would be responsible for all aspects of customer relationships, from initial consultation through implementation and ongoing support. It would involve leading a team of over 30 professionals across multiple states with full budget authority and strategic planning responsibility. "The compensation package reflects the importance of this role," Amanda said, sliding a folder across the table. "Base salary of $140,000 plus performance bonuses that could add another $30,000 to $50,000 annually. Full health benefits, 4 weeks paid vacation, and equity participation in the company's growth." The financial package was stunning, nearly double what I had been earning at TechForward, with benefits and opportunities that Rob had never even mentioned as possibilities. But what impressed me even more was Amanda's description of Innovate Tech's corporate culture and values. The company had policies specifically designed to support employees during family emergencies, mental health resources, flexible work arrangements, and a commitment to promoting from within based on merit rather than politics. "Amanda, this sounds incredible. But I have to ask, how can you be sure I'm the right person for such a significant role? You've seen my work from a distance, but you don't know me personally or professionally. Amanda smiled, as if she had been expecting exactly that question. Jessica, I've done more research on you than you might realize. I've spoken with 3 of your former clients at TechForward, including the CIO at Lone Star Retail. They all described you as the most knowledgeable, reliable, and client-focused professional they've worked with. They specifically mentioned your ability to explain complex technical concepts in terms they could understand, and your commitment to their success rather than just completing projects. Amanda also revealed that she had spoken with several TechForward employees who had worked with me, though she wouldn't reveal their names to protect their current employment. The picture that emerged from these conversations was of someone with exceptional technical skills, natural leadership ability, and uncompromising integrity. Those are exactly the qualities we need for this position. The thoroughness of Amanda's research was both impressive and reassuring. She had clearly invested significant time and effort into evaluating my suitability for the role, which suggested that this was not an impulsive offer based on sympathy for my situation. I'm very interested in the opportunity, I said. But I should mention that I'm currently pursuing legal action against TechForward for wrongful termination. I want to make sure that doesn't create any complications for Innovate Tech. Amanda waved away my concern with a dismissive gesture. Jessica, pursuing legal action against an employer who treated you illegally shows exactly the kind of backbone we want in our leadership team. Innovate Tech has an excellent legal department, and we're not afraid of frivolous retaliation from competitors. If anything, your willingness to stand up for your rights makes you even more attractive as a candidate. She explained that Innovate Tech had dealt with similar situations before when hiring talented professionals from other companies. We believe in doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or expensive. If TechForward wants to make an issue of your employment here, they'll find that we have resources and determination to match theirs. Amanda also offered to connect me with Innovate Tech's legal team to coordinate with Patricia Hayes on my wrongful termination case. Our attorneys have experience with these situations, and they can provide support or resources that might be helpful in your case against TechForward. We protect our people, both current and future employees. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours, with Amanda showing me detailed plans for the client experience division, introducing me to several team members via video conference, and discussing the timeline for implementation. By the end of our conversation, I felt more excited about my career prospects than I had in years. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to build something meaningful with a leader who shared my values. Jessica, I don't want to pressure you into a quick decision, Amanda said as we prepared to leave the coffee shop. But I am hoping you'll consider accepting our offer. The Client Experience Division launch is scheduled for next month, and having you in place to lead that initiative would be invaluable. I looked at Amanda, thinking about everything that had happened in the past week. 5 days ago, I thought, I knew exactly where my career was headed. Then Rob had destroyed everything I had built, forcing me to confront the reality that loyalty and hard work were not always rewarded fairly. But his betrayal had also led me to this moment, sitting across from a respected industry leader who was offering me opportunities I never could have imagined. Amanda, I accept your offer, I said, extending my hand for a handshake that felt like the beginning of a new chapter in my life. When would you like me to start? Amanda's smile was radiant as she shook my hand firmly. How about Monday? That gives you the weekend to celebrate and prepare for what's going to be an exciting new adventure. As we parted ways in the parking lot, Amanda handed me a welcome packet with detailed information about Innovate Tech's policies, benefits, and organizational structure. Welcome to the team, Jessica. I think you're going to love what we're building here. The drive back to Austin felt completely different from the trip north that morning. I was no longer an unemployed victim of workplace injustice. I was the newly appointed Director of Client Experience for one of the most respected companies in the industry. The salary increase, the leadership opportunity, and the chance to work for someone who valued integrity over politics felt like vindication for every difficult decision I had made. As I crossed the Austin city limits, my phone buzzed with a text message from Emma asking how the meeting had gone. Instead of texting back, I called her directly, eager to share the incredible news with someone who would understand the magnitude of what had just happened. "Emma, you're not going to believe this," I said as soon as she answered. "Oh my God, Jess, please tell me you have good news. We all need something positive after this week." Emma's voice was excited and hopeful, clearly anticipating something significant. I spent the next 20 minutes describing my meeting with Amanda Richardson, the job offer, and my decision to accept the position at Innovate Tech. "This is unbelievable!" Emma practically shouted into the phone. "Jessica, this is so much better than anything TechForward ever offered you. And Amanda Richardson, she's like a legend in the industry. This is incredible." Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself laughing for the first time in days. Emma immediately wanted to know if there would be opportunities for other TechForward refugees to join Innovate Tech. Amanda mentioned that they're growing rapidly and always looking for talented professionals. I told her I might know some people who would be interested in making a change. Emma's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Count me in. Working. For Rob, after what he did to you, would be impossible. If Innovate Tech is looking for project coordinators, I want to be considered." I promised to put Emma in touch with Amanda's recruiting team and to provide strong recommendations for her and anyone else from our team who wanted to explore opportunities. That evening, I called my mother to share the news about my new position. Her joy and relief were evident in her voice as she realized that Rob's betrayal had ultimately led to something much better than what I had lost. "Mija, this is wonderful. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be blessings, in disguise. That horrible man thought he was destroying your career, but instead he pushed you toward something better." As I settled into bed that night, I reflected on the dramatic changes that had occurred in just 5 days. The weekend retreat that was supposed to celebrate my promotion had turned into a nightmare of family crisis and workplace betrayal. But that same crisis had revealed my true values, connected me with an exceptional legal advocate, and led to an opportunity that was far superior to anything TechForward had offered. Rob had thought he was punishing me for choosing family over career advancement. Instead, he had freed me from a toxic environment and opened the door to a position with a company that actually valued both professional excellence and human decency. Sometimes the people who try to hurt us end up giving us exactly what we need to succeed beyond their wildest nightmares. Monday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Instead of dreading another day under Rob's toxic leadership, I was preparing to begin a new chapter with a company that had already demonstrated more respect for me in one meeting than TechForward had shown in 5 years. I dressed carefully, in my best professional attire, choosing a navy blue suit that conveyed confidence and competence. The Innovate Tech headquarters in Dallas was impressive, a modern glass building with clean lines and an open, welcoming lobby filled with natural light. The receptionist greeted me warmly, explaining that Amanda Richardson was expecting me and would personally conduct my orientation. As I waited in the comfortable seating area, I watched employees moving through the space with purposeful energy and genuine smiles, a stark contrast to the stressed and guarded expressions I had grown accustomed to seeing at TechForward. Amanda appeared promptly at 9 o'clock, looking polished and energetic in a way that suggested she genuinely enjoyed her work. "Jessica, welcome to your first day at Innovate Tech. Are you ready to see what we've built here?" Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself matching her excitement as she led me on a comprehensive tour of the facilities. The office environment was everything Amanda had promised during our coffee meeting. Open collaborative spaces were balanced with private offices for focused work, Conference rooms featured state-of-the-art technology for client presentations, and the break areas were designed to encourage informal interaction between departments. Most impressive was the Employee Wellness Center, complete with a fitness facility, meditation room, and quiet spaces for personal phone calls or family emergencies. "We believe that taking care of our people is the foundation of business success," Amanda explained as we walked through the Wellness Center. "When employees know they're valued as human beings, not just productivity units, they naturally perform at higher levels. It's not complicated, but it requires leadership that actually cares about people." The philosophy was so fundamentally different from Rob's approach that it felt revolutionary. Amanda introduced me to dozens of employees throughout the tour, and their genuine enthusiasm for their work was evident in every conversation. People spoke about projects with passion, discussed challenges with confidence, and mentioned leadership with respect rather than fear. My new office was spacious and bright, with a view of downtown Dallas and enough room for both formal meetings and casual collaboration. Amanda had arranged for my computer and office supplies to be ready, along with a welcome basket containing local coffee, pastries, and a handwritten note from the entire executive team expressing their excitement about my joining the company. "Your first week will be primarily orientation and relationship building," Amanda explained as we settled into my new office. "I want you to meet with every department head, understand our current client portfolio, and begin developing your vision for the client experience division. There's no pressure to make immediate changes. I hired you for your judgment, not your ability to follow someone else's playbook." The trust and autonomy Amanda was offering was both exhilarating and slightly overwhelming. At TechForward, every significant decision had required multiple approvals and careful navigation of political sensitivities. Here, I was being given the authority to shape an entire division according to my professional judgment and experience. During my first week at Innovate Tech, I had the opportunity to review the company's client relationships and identify areas for improvement. The existing processes were solid, but lacked the systematic approach and personal touch that had made my work at TechForward successful. I began developing a comprehensive strategy for enhancing client satisfaction, streamlining communication, protocols, and creating accountability measures that would ensure consistent service quality. Meanwhile, Patricia Hayes was making significant progress on my wrongful termination case against TechForward. She called me Thursday afternoon with an update that was both satisfying and troubling. "Jessica, I sent our demand letter to TechForward's legal department on Tuesday, and their response has been quite revealing about the company's internal dynamics." Patricia explained that TechForward's attorneys had immediately requested all documentation related to my termination, suggesting they were not confident in Rob's version of events. When lawyers start asking for internal files before responding to a demand letter, it usually means they've discovered something that contradicts what they were initially told. "I suspect Rob's misrepresentation of your situation is causing problems for the company." The legal investigation was apparently uncovering additional evidence of Rob's misconduct beyond my specific case. TechForward's HR department has been very cooperative, providing documentation that shows your exemplary performance record and the complete absence of any disciplinary actions or performance concerns. They've also provided emails and witness statements that contradict Rob's characterization of your departure from the retreat. More significantly, Patricia had learned that David Thompson was conducting his own internal investigation into the circumstances of my termination. Several employees have come forward with information about Rob's behavior and his misrepresentation of your family emergency. It appears that your former colleagues are not willing to let this injustice stand unchallenged. The loyalty of my former team was deeply moving, even though it put their own job security at risk. Patricia mentioned that Emma, Marcus, and Tyler had all provided sworn statements detailing their knowledge of my mother's medical emergency and Rob's inappropriate response. Their willingness to testify on your behalf, despite potential retaliation, demonstrates the respect and affection your colleagues have for you. Friday afternoon brought news that vindicated every difficult decision I had made over the past 2 weeks. Patricia called with barely controlled excitement in her voice. "Jessica, TechForward wants to settle. Their attorneys called an hour ago, with a settlement offer that exceeds our initial demand by 30%. The settlement terms were comprehensive and generous. TechForward was offering a financial package equivalent to 2 years' salary, a neutral reference letter that emphasized my professional accomplishments, removal of any negative documentation from my personnel file, and a public statement acknowledging that my termination was not related to performance issues. Most importantly, they were agreeing to implement new policies protecting employees who needed time off for family medical emergencies. They're also offering to cover all your legal fees and expenses," Patricia added. "This is clearly a situation where the company recognizes they made a serious error and wants to resolve it quickly before it becomes public knowledge. Rob's mishandling of your case has apparently created significant liability for TechForward. The settlement offer was more than fair, providing financial security while I established myself at Innovate Tech and sending a clear message that Rob's behavior had been unacceptable. More importantly, the policy changes would protect future employees from experiencing the same injustice I had endured. I accept the settlement terms," I told Patricia. "Let's finalize this as quickly as possible." That evening, I celebrated with dinner at one of Austin's finest restaurants, reflecting on the dramatic transformation my life had undergone in just 2 weeks. The person who had been devastated by Rob's betrayal had emerged stronger, more confident, and positioned for greater success than ever before. The settlement provided financial security, while my new position offered professional opportunities that exceeded my wildest expectations. Over the weekend, I received text messages from Emma, Marcus, and Tyler with news that was both satisfying and somewhat sad. Rob had been terminated from TechForward on Friday afternoon, effective immediately. According to Emma's sources in the company, David Thompson had discovered the extent of Rob's deception and decided that his behavior was incompatible with the company's values. The official reason given was failure to uphold company standards and misrepresentation of employee situations, Emma texted. "But everyone knows it's because of what he did to you." David apparently went through all the documentation from the retreat weekend and realized how badly Rob had lied about the circumstances. The news was gratifying, but it also reminded me of how much damage Rob had caused not just to me, but to the entire TechForward organization. His willingness to exploit a family tragedy for personal advancement had ultimately destroyed his own career and damaged the company's reputation. Justice had been served, but at a significant cost to everyone involved. More positive news came. On Sunday, when Emma called to tell me she had accepted a position with Innovate Tech as a senior project coordinator. Amanda Richardson's recruiting team called me Friday afternoon, and after a video interview and reference check, they offered me a position that's significantly better than what I had at TechForward. I start in 2 weeks. Tyler and Marcus. We're also exploring opportunities with Innovate Tech and other companies, recognizing that working at TechForward under new management would never feel the same after witnessing Rob's treatment of me. The team that had worked so effectively together was scattering to new opportunities, but we were all moving toward situations that valued our skills and integrity. My second week at Innovate Tech was spent developing detailed plans for the client. Experience Division launch. Amanda had given me complete autonomy to structure the department according to my vision, and I was creating something that incorporated the best practices I had learned at TechForward while eliminating the toxic elements that had made working there increasingly difficult. The team I was assembling was exceptional, combining experienced professionals from various companies with talented newcomers who brought fresh perspectives and energy. Emma's arrival would add someone who understood my working style and shared my commitment to client satisfaction. Together, we were building something that felt both professionally exciting and personally meaningful. Wednesday morning brought a phone call that surprised me despite everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The caller ID showed David Thompson's direct number, and after a moment's hesitation, I decided to answer. "Jessica, this is David. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." David's voice carried a tone of humility and regret that was completely different from his usual confident executive demeanor. "I wanted to call personally to apologize for what happened at TechForward. I've spent the past 2 weeks investigating the circumstances of your termination, and I'm appalled by what I discovered." He explained that the internal investigation had revealed the extent of Rob's deception and manipulation. Rob deliberately misrepresented your family emergency to make it appear that you had chosen personal convenience over professional responsibility. He never mentioned that your mother was having life-threatening surgery, and he actively discouraged me from speaking with you directly about the situation. David's apology was genuine and heartfelt, but it also highlighted how easily he had been manipulated by someone willing to exploit a family tragedy for personal gain. "I should have gotten the full story before making any decisions about your position. My failure to do proper due diligence allowed an injustice to occur, and I take full responsibility for that." The conversation was both validating and somewhat hollow. David's recognition of the wrongdoing was important, but it couldn't undo the damage that had been caused or restore the trust that had been broken. "David, I appreciate your apology and your willingness to acknowledge what went wrong. The settlement agreement addresses the immediate issues, but the real problem was allowing someone like Rob to have authority over other people's careers." David agreed completely with my assessment. Rob's termination was just the beginning of changes we're making to prevent this type of situation from recurring. We're implementing new policies for performance management, employee protection during family emergencies, and oversight of supervisory decisions. Your experience has forced us to examine our entire approach to leadership accountability. He also revealed that TechForward was struggling with the aftermath of my departure and Rob's subsequent firing. "The Dallas expansion project has been significantly delayed because Rob never understood the technical specifications you had developed. Several clients have expressed concerns about management stability, and we've lost 2 major contracts that were specifically tied to your involvement. The business consequences of Rob's actions were apparently more severe than anyone had initially realized. Jessica, I know this is presumptuous given everything that's happened, but I want you to know that TechForward would welcome your return under terms that reflect your true value to the organization. The director position is still available, along with equity participation and complete autonomy over your department." David's offer was generous and probably represented genuine recognition of my professional capabilities, but it came too late to repair the fundamental damage that had been done. "David, I appreciate the offer, but I've found something better. Innovate Tech values both professional excellence and human decency, which makes it impossible for me to consider returning to an environment where someone like Rob could have gained the power to destroy careers." The conversation ended cordially, with David expressing his understanding of my decision and his hope that TechForward could learn from the mistakes that had been made. "I hope someday we can work together again under better circumstances," he said. "You're an exceptional professional, and losing you was one of the biggest mistakes this company has ever made." After ending the call with David, I sat in my new office looking out at the Dallas skyline and reflecting on the complete reversal of fortune that had occurred over the past month. The retreat weekend that was supposed to celebrate my promotion had instead revealed the toxic environment I had been working in and set in motion events that led to something far better than I had ever imagined possible. Thursday brought the official launch of the Client Experience Division, with a company-wide meeting where Amanda introduced me to the entire Innovate Tech organization. Her introduction was generous and enthusiastic, highlighting my professional accomplishments and expressing confidence in my ability to elevate the company's client relationships to new levels. Jessica Martinez brings a combination of technical expertise, leadership experience, and integrity that perfectly embodies Innovate Tech's values, Amanda told the assembled employees. Her commitment to excellence and her focus on building genuine, Relationships with clients will be instrumental in our continued growth and success. The response from my new colleagues was warm and welcoming, with several people approaching me after the meeting to express their excitement about working with the client experience division. The culture at Innovate Tech was everything Amanda had promised: collaborative, supportive, and focused on achieving success through teamwork rather than internal competition. Over the following weeks, the Client Experience Division began implementing new protocols that significantly improved client satisfaction and retention rates. The systematic approach I had developed, combined with the resources and support Amanda provided, created measurable improvements in every metric we tracked. Client feedback scores increased by 25%, project completion times improved by 15%, and the number of contract renewals reached an all-time high. More importantly, the team culture within the division was everything I had hoped to create: collaborative, supportive, and focused on collective success rather than individual advancement. Emma's arrival brought additional expertise and institutional knowledge that accelerated our progress, and the new hires we brought in from various backgrounds contributed fresh perspectives and innovative solutions. 3 months after starting at Innovate Tech, I received a LinkedIn message from Tyler with news that was both predictable and satisfying. TechForward had lost the Lone Star retail contract, with the client citing concerns about management stability and continuity of service. They specifically mentioned that they had expected to work with you on the expansion phase of their implementation, Tyler wrote. Losing that contract apparently triggered a broader review of client relationships, and the results haven't been pretty. The business consequences of Rob's actions continued to ripple through TechForward, with several other major clients expressing concerns about the company's direction and leadership stability. The Dallas expansion that Rob had been so eager to lead had been suspended indefinitely, and there were rumors of potential layoffs as the company struggled to maintain revenue levels without the contracts that had been lost. Meanwhile, Innovate Tech was thriving under Amanda's leadership and the contributions of our expanded team. The success of the Client Experience Division had attracted attention from industry publications, and I had been invited to speak at several conferences about innovative approaches to client relationship management. The recognition was professionally gratifying, but more importantly, it demonstrated that the values-based approach Amanda championed was not just morally superior, but also more effective for business success. 6 months after my termination, from TechForward, I was promoted to Vice President of Client Experience, with responsibility for all customer-facing operations across Innovate Tech's multiple locations. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, expanded equity participation, and a seat on the company's executive committee. More meaningful than the financial rewards was Amanda's explanation for the promotion. "Jessica, your success here isn't just about your technical skills or project management abilities," Amanda said during our promotion meeting. "It's about your character and your commitment to doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or costly. Those qualities make you not just an excellent employee, but an ideal leader for this organization." The contrast between Amanda's leadership philosophy and Rob's approach could not have been more stark. Where Rob had demanded loyalty through fear and manipulation, Amanda inspired dedication through trust and mutual respect. Where Rob had viewed employees as expendable resources, Amanda saw them as valuable partners in building something meaningful and sustainable. On a warm Saturday morning in October, nearly a year after the retreat weekend that had changed everything, I drove to Zilker Park in Austin to meet my mother for our monthly walk around Lady Bird Lake. She had made a complete recovery from her heart attack and was more active and energetic than she had been in years. The doctor said her positive attitude and strong family support had been crucial factors in her healing process. "Mija, you look so happy," she said as we began our walk along the scenic trail. "I can see it in your eyes. You're doing work. That fulfills you with people who appreciate you." Her observation was accurate. The stress and anxiety that had characterized my final years at TechForward had been replaced by enthusiasm and genuine excitement about my professional future. I told my mother about my recent promotion and the expansion plans Amanda had shared with me for the following year. InnovateTech was opening new offices in 3 additional states, and I would be responsible for developing client experience strategies for all locations. "It's more responsibility than I ever imagined having at this stage of my career," I said, "but I'm working with people who believe in the same values I do." My mother stopped walking and took my hands in hers, looking at me with the proud expression I remembered from childhood achievements and milestones. "Jessica, I want you to know something important. When I had my heart attack and you chose to come to the hospital instead of staying at that company retreat, you gave me the greatest gift possible. Not just your presence during a frightening time, but the knowledge that I had raised a daughter who understood what really matters in life." Her words brought tears to my eyes as I realized the full significance of the choice I had made that weekend. "Mom, I never questioned that decision for even a second. You're the most important person in my world, and no job could ever be more valuable than being there when you needed me." She smiled and squeezed my hands tighter. "And that's exactly why you're succeeding now," she said. "People can sense integrity, and they're drawn to leaders who have genuine character. That horrible man thought he was punishing you for having principles, but instead, he freed you to find people who share those principles." As we continued our walk, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought me to this point. Rob's betrayal had initially felt like a devastating blow that threatened to derail my entire career. Instead, it had revealed my true priorities, connected me with exceptional legal representation, and opened doors to opportunities that exceeded my wildest expectations. The legal settlement with TechForward had provided financial security and vindication. But more importantly, it had established precedent that would protect other employees from similar treatment in the future. Patricia Hayes had mentioned that the case was being cited in other wrongful termination suits, helping to strengthen protections for workers who faced family medical emergencies. Emma had thrived at InnovateTech, earning her own promotion to senior project manager and becoming one of Amanda's most trusted team leaders. Marcus and Tyler had both found excellent positions with other companies, and we maintained regular contact through a group text thread where we shared professional updates and celebrated each other's successes. Even the news about TechForward had become less painful and more educational over time. The company had eventually recovered from the losses caused by Rob's actions, but only after significant restructuring and a complete overhaul of their management practices. David Thompson had implemented the policy changes promised in my settlement agreement, and by all accounts, the company culture had improved significantly. Rob himself had largely disappeared from the industry, with rumors suggesting he had moved to another state and taken a position in a completely different field. His behavior at TechForward had become well known within the Texas tech community, making it virtually impossible for him to find a leadership position with any reputable company. Justice had been served, not through vindictive action on my part, but through the natural consequences of his own choices. As my mother and I completed our walk and sat on a bench overlooking the lake, I thought about the lessons I had learned from this experience. The most important was that integrity and family relationships were more valuable than any professional achievement or financial reward. The second was that toxic work environments were not normal or acceptable, and that leaders who truly valued their employees would never force them to choose between career advancement and basic human decency. "Mom, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had made a different choice that weekend?" I asked. "What if I had stayed at the retreat and missed being with you during your surgery?" She considered the question seriously before responding. "I think you would have gotten that promotion Rob stole from you, at least temporarily," she said. "But I also think you would have spent the rest of your career wondering if you could trust yourself to make the right choice when it really mattered. Sometimes the most important decisions aren't about what we gain, but about who we remain." Her wisdom reminded me why I had never regretted leaving the retreat to be with her, despite the immediate professional consequences. The person who had chosen family over career advancement was the same person who had refused to accept Rob's manipulation and had ultimately found something far better than what she had lost. As the sun began to set over Austin, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized that my story wasn't really about revenge or vindication. It was about staying true to my values during a crisis and discovering that integrity was not just morally right, but also practically effective for building a meaningful career in life. The retreat weekend that had seemed like such a disaster had actually been a gift, an opportunity to discover who I really was when faced with an impossible choice, and to learn that there were companies and leaders who shared my commitment to treating people with dignity and respect. Rob had tried to punish me for having principles, but instead, he had pushed me toward people who appreciated those same principles. My phone buzzed with a text message from Amanda, asking if I was available for a brief call Sunday morning to discuss an exciting new opportunity. "I know it's the weekend," she wrote, "but I just got off a call with a potential client who specifically requested to work with you based on your reputation in the industry. This could be our biggest contract ever." I smiled as I read the message, thinking about how different my life had become since that devastating weekend almost a year ago. The professional recognition, financial security, and meaningful work relationships I now enjoyed were all direct results of choosing integrity over convenience, family over career advancement, and principles over politics. "Mom, I think this story is just beginning," I said as we gathered our things to head back to our cars. "The best chapters are still ahead of us." She hugged me tightly, and I could feel her pride and love in that embrace. "Mija, I've never doubted that for a second. You're building something beautiful with your life, and I'm so proud to be your mother." As we parted ways, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the difficult experience that had ultimately led me to exactly where I was meant to be. The drive back to my apartment gave me time to reflect on the phone call I would have with Amanda the next morning and the continued growth of the client experience division. But more than professional success, I was grateful for the reminder that choosing to do the right thing, even when it cost me everything I thought I wanted, had led to discovering something far better than I had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the worst betrayals become the greatest gifts, not because they don't hurt, but because they force us to discover our true strength and lead us toward people who appreciate our authentic selves. Rob had thought he was destroying my career when he fired me for choosing family over corporate politics. Instead, he had freed me to build something better with people who understood that professional success and human decency were not mutually exclusive. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.